I still stand. I still stand as the second child, the first boy. Second child, first boy. I still stand strong, Cecil. I make no bones about it. Still stand strong as a follower, as a supporter, and a very strong supporter at that of the Dominican Labour Party up till today, 75 years ago.
I just want to remind listeners and the viewers that this program tonight is a paid political program by the Dominican Labour Party. Just wanted to ensure that you are aware of that. So, yes, Victor, I also want to find out from you as a boy, how much did you hear in the house about Sean Alfred and that of Mr. Lou Black in the formation of the Dominican Labour Party?
Cecil, it used to be like an alphabet. To learn the alphabet, you would hear about those people. I can remember I was going through some of Daddy's books. There is something in the Caribbean, in the Dominican, they used to have the Dominican Welfare News. I have copies. I maybe have about over 40 copies of those things, where names of Felician Alfrey and Lou Black are in some articles in those Dominican Welfare News. So I have been hearing, and I know, and I have followed, and is still following the movement, the Dominican Labour Party movement. Ambassador Douglas said earlier on that the Labour Party is a movement, but it has always been said that the Dominican Labour Party is not only a movement, but it's a learning institution for other other political movements, other political parties. And if they haven't learned from the Dominican Labour Party now, after 70 years, that is why the Labour Party will continue winning elections after elections, because it's an institution of learning for the other political parties in Dominica.
And so let me go across to Ambassador Douglas. You were speaking earlier on, Ambassador Douglas, in reference to you as a boy, in your boyhood days, what was happening in the home. I think you ended by saying that Rosie actually lived at your parents' home at that time.
Yeah, I was saying that in relation to understanding where Marvin was coming from and what the movement was like in the early days, especially after 1980 when we lost the elections, because those were very, very difficult times, very painful times in the trenches when it wasn't popular to be Labour. And people was actually calling the party Labour powder. When you see a Freedom Party rally go by, you know that you were on to lose the next election. And we went through perhaps 4 cycles of that. So some time must be spent on that, and even before that, to understand how we found ourselves languishing in opposition. So that's what I was alluding to when I spoke about growing up in the home, because really that started really when Rosie came back from Canada, perhaps around maybe late to middle 70s, 1976, 77 or thereabouts, and started the Popular Independence Committee to agitate for independence from Britain. And that went right into the 1978 independence. We eventually got independence in 1978, due in part to his agitation and others. And it was the Labour Party itself and Patrick John who brought Dominica to independence. But then right after that, in 1979, we went through a very tumultuous period. Almost we lost our way. Mike was fired by Patrick from the party. And in 1979, Patrick himself, perhaps from bad advice from people around him, tried to pass 2 pieces of legislation in Parliament that the people of Dominica, the masses of Dominica, were against. and that led to the 47-day strike and blah, 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 and he was stormed out of office. So the 1980s, really, the party ended up splitting, bursting in 4 pieces, or 3 or 4 pieces at the time, and spend the next 20 years in opposition. And that is the part of the party, really, that Marvin and Manu, we would know, because we, like Marvin was saying, we walked in the trenches with Rosie in those days, you know, and Mr. Joseph here kind of referred to it when he was talking about Rosie organizing some of the biggest St. Peter's feast he had seen in Kalidishi. But all of that was St. Peter's feast was just one of the activities that Rosie organized. Rosie started off with the African Liberation Day celebrations, and fortunately or coincidentally, we also celebrated, I believe, Africa Day yesterday. Yeah, and Rosie really used his global and international influence to assist the politics on the ground when the Labour Party was at its darkest.
And so I want to go across to Emmanuel Nanton, to find out from him, understanding the works of Michael Douglas, because he would have worked quite a lot with Michael Douglas. So I would like Nanton to tell us, you know, some of the things that he would have done as a boy going to PSS and working with Michael Douglas, what it was like, you know, in those rough periods of the 80s.
Yeah, let me just say, if we just mute our mics when we're not talking, then we might not get the echo. So let's try and.
Oh yes. But thank you.
Yeah, Cecil, Ian's touched on part of the party that I'm very proud of as a Liberal, and I really want to speak too. But before that, I wanted to just go back briefly on the formation of the party, because it was the formation of the party on the principles of the party, taking care of those less fortunate among us, that we believe in today. And that's what carried us through the dark days of the 80s. So the party was formed to give rights and to take care of the rights of the working class people. And by ensuring that we fought for the well-being and the welfare of the working class, we got committed to that. And that is the movement that we're still in today. And that movement will continue for the next 20, 30, 40, for the next 100 years. Because once we are grounded by the principles of the party of taking care of those who are less fortunate among us, I believe we're on the right path. And we, as the current leaders of the party, we're not perfect, and we wouldn't do everything right. But who are onlookers, you can come in. The door is open, so you can make contributions and help us do it better. We're not perfect. We'll never be perfect. But you have ideas, come in and help us, let us build that. So, Cecil, that takes us to the part of the 80s, where we were in opposition and we were the Labour powder. And those were tough days. Those were trying times. And Ian made mention of the fact that the party was divided, and because of the division in Labour, that is what led us to be in opposition. We first had the division in the early 70s, when the party had to go to court for the symbol of the party, and then that division continued after 75 when PJ came on board and fired Mike and a few others, and then you had the bringing of the left, and you had the Grenada Revolution, and guys wanted to be more closely associated with the leftist parties and the revolution in Grenada. So at the time you had the Dominican Labour Party, you had the Democratic Labour Party, you had Alliance. So we were divided into three. We had Democratic, we had the Shoe Labour, Hat Labour, and Alliance is the answer with where the hammer was the symbol of Alliance. So even when the Freedom Party won the elections in 1980, and they seem to have won it convincingly in terms of seats, when you look at the votes, there were more votes for the divided Labour back then, as opposed to, and I think they would have gotten more seats had they stayed together as a united party. So that brought us back into opposition. And the party went for trying times, difficult times. You and I were there. Ian was there. Marvin, Paolo, all of us who were around. We were the powder of Labour, And we always believed that because of the principles of the party, because of the philosophies, because of what we stood for, we will survive. We will get back there. And as you mentioned, at the time, I was a boy at PSS, and Mike would come to me and say, Mano, identify for me a young boy from a poor family at PSS who we can send to university. So when he or she comes back, then they can help pull out the family out of poverty, because Labour cared about people. We cared about elevating the lives of the people of the working class. So we kept grounded in those ideals, and we are still grounded in those ideals, trying to bring up as many people as possible out of the working class. I mean, I recall there was a very, very strong example where I identified a young man who was very bright. He lived in a house with no water, no electricity, nothing. And I identified him for a scholarship to go to study, and he didn't believe that he could get that scholarship. So when we were trying when Mike was trying to fax the list to Cuba at Liat office, where Dominic is now, I was trying to run and bring the paper in when I looked for a parking spot. When I came back, he was still outside because he didn't believe to himself that he would have gotten a scholarship. Eventually, I came back, got the paper, run in there, give it to Mike. Mike faxed his name onto Cuba, and he went out to Cuba to study. And when he went to study, his brother, who was 19 at the time, came to me and said, Mano, I saw what you did for my brother. I believe that I can go to university too. But he was 19 years old, and he had not gone to high school. But he believed that he could have gone to study because Labour gave him hope. Labour gave him the expectation that he too can do better. And when I sat with him and tried to figure out how exactly we could get him to work on, I brought him to SDA, Seventh-day Adventist School at Benville. That was a new school at the time. And he got accepted at SDA to start high school at 19. At the time, he was working as a laborer, a lab boy, digging a drain in Picard when he stopped me at that time. And he went to SDA. He completed his secondary education. He went on to Civocol. Then he came back. We gave him a scholarship to Cuba, and he ended up as an engineer because Labour gave that family hope. And that is what we are about as a party, Cecil. I share the Daibla. Labour is about the people.
So let me
Labour
ask.
is about the working class.
So let me ask.
We try all the time. You may have other dreams, other ambitions, other ideas, but come in and let us see what we can do together as a people, following those ideologies and philosophies of the Dominican Labour Party.
So let me ask Marvelyn now. Marvelyn, what kind of hope as a young girl in the House of Labour, in the House of the Douglases, in Portsmouth, what kind of hope that the Labour Party gave you while they themselves were in opposition?
Oh, Cecil, growing up in that house, I saw things that I know if I wasn't in that house, I would not have seen. I knew that I had to go to high school. I knew that I had to go to college. I knew I had, and it just gives you that drive, being around Rosie, being around Mike, Ian, Hakim. I mean, Hakim was brilliant. Me and Ian had to study. We had to study. But Hakim was brilliant. And it just gave me hope. I just knew that my life I had to have a college degree, come May, I wanted to go to Cuba. It didn't happen that way, but I went to England. So I knew that was just my future and that was my life. My life was just going places, being there.
Now, Victor, the Dominican Labour Party in that period in the 60s into the 70s themselves had rough times too. We saw in 1961 the Labour Party won the elections after beating the DUPP, which had the symbol the hand. The symbol was also the hand. We saw them in 1966 winning the elections. And then Libla at that period propelled the Labour Party into wanting to have its own internal rule by setting up on the 1st of March associate statehood. And in 1970 we saw Libla firing three of his prominent ministers, in the persons of Nan Ducre, who was his Minister of Trade, and who was also the president of the party, Will Strathmore, fired him, and he was then the vice president of the Labour Party, and Mayor Moore fired her. She was also a member of the Labour Party. During that time, you would have been a young boy, your father involved in writing speeches for Libla. Would your father at any given time tell you or said to the family what kind of problems that the Labour Party was going through?
Cecil, if I tell you, my father was a strict disciplinarian, number one. And my father never brought not even his work period to the family. My father, everything was kept to him. This thing was never discussed at home. He knew the problems, he knew what transpired, but to come to the family and said, look, this is what happened, this is the infraction between Libla and Amor and Mary Moyer. No. He never said any of those things to the family. But we knew, I mean, I was hearing, I can remember when this thing happened. And Cecil, during that time, I don't know if you recall, there were almost 3 or 4 injunctions against the Labour Party, by the former DUPP. One by E.B. Allen and Amor and Dupini. They filed injunctions against the Labour Party for symbols, for the symbol.
Also Nandukri.
Also Nandukri, that's right. And there were 4 injunctions. If you go through the Labour Party past, you will see those injunctions. It's still written there. A few days ago, I was looking at them. 4 injunctions against the Labour Party. And Libla still handled everything. He got back his symbol that he wanted, the hat, the hand, and then he got back the hat.
I think Libla wanted to have the hat when the injunction was placed, and he wanted the name of the Dominica Labour Party.
That's right.
Nandukri then became the leader of the Dominica Labour Party, and then Mr. Libla created what was called the Libla Labour Party, right. And then had the symbol, the shoe. The shoe. I've shown Ian that you are able to help us on having a little clearer view of some of that history.
Yes, Cecil, you're correct. You're correct on that. And that is where we must start. We must go back to the beginning, and we must, in any Labour Party story or in any Labour Party discussion, after you mention Felician Alfrey and Isilo Black for actually starting the party and the founders of the party, you have to mention, you definitely have to speak about E.O. Libla, because E.O. Libla was really the person that set the Labour Party on a strong foundation and a good footing. It was Libla who took over the party and actually contested the 1961 elections and won the general elections for the Dominica Labour Party at that time. And that is actually where the movement started growing. And a lot of what the Labour Party is actually doing today was actually started by Libla in those days. You see, and some of the people within the party who rebelled against him or caused the mutiny, like Mabel Moyer James and Duke Ray, Rayleigh and Stevens, they probably felt that Libla was a bit too authoritarian, and Libla had a vision for the development of Dominica. Libla wanted to see that all Dominicans enjoyed the benefits of a better Dominica, no matter where you come from, what your station was in life, who your mother was, what your surname was. And Libla wanted everybody, and that is why some of the major pieces of development, I mean, Dominica had a massive development surge. All the roads, I mean, there were no roads for people to move from Roseau to Portsmouth or from Portsmouth to Roseau. They had to use the boat. They had to use a launch from Portsmouth, and it was going all the way up. Maybe stopped at Dubla, stopped at Collio, stopped at Coley District on its way to Roseau. Or you had to use the Transinsular Road. So all of the major pieces of development.
The young people who are listening here may not know. The young people who are listening may not know where that road is. So you have to help them to
understand. Road is the road. Let's say from Marigot, coming all the way back through Bells, coming into Port Cassé, and then on into Roseau, through Kinfield and Roger. That is what the Transinsular Road was, and it was bad at the time. It wasn't paved like how this government have surfaced the road and it's a smooth driving. It was bad at the time. Even the road from, that's why it's called the Eo-Libla Highway. The road from Portsmouth to Roseau was actually cut by Eo-Libla. When Libla went to England, because remember we were not independent yet, it was just associated statehood. Libla was the premier. When Libla went to England to ask for money to do the West Coast Road, the British laughed at him. They tell him about a little place like Dominica, what you doing with highway? What you talking about? Highway from Roseau to Portsmouth. And he came back to Dominica disappointed. And in a few months, he went back to England and told them, okay, if you don't want to give me a highway from Portsmouth to Roseau, give me 5 feeder roads to link the plantations along, and the estates, sorry, not the plantations, the estates along the west coast, the Batterley, Coley District Estate, Collyho into Dubla and Syndicate of Espanol. And that is how he joined the 5 feeder roads they had given him between Kinfield, Massac, and right down to Picard. And that's how we got the West Coast Road, the highway. So for us to understand what Mike and Rosie fought for and why Mike and Rosie really championed the cause of the Labour Party, we have to understand the foundation that was laid by Libla. Because remember, Mike and Rosie's father, RBD was basically a big estate owner, and RBD was never a Labourite. RBD more associated with the DUPP and with the Freedom Party rather than with the Labourite. It was Mike and Rosie championed the cause of the poor and the people who worked on the estate at Hampstead for his father and stuff, because of the principles of Libla. In fact, Libla ran an election when the North was won, because Dominica had 8 seats at the time, and Libla beat RBD and then beat Frank Barron in the North. Frank Barron left Portsmouth and never came back, closed his shop and went into Roseau and never came back. And Libla was such a powerful politician. Libla left the North constituency and went into the South constituency, ran and won that. Libla changed about 3 or 4 constituencies, came back down to the West, ran against, I think, Den's grandfather.
Howell Shillingford. In Collio.
Yes. And him, pardon me?
In Collio. In the Collio area.
Collio and beat him.
Yes.
So that was the kind of power of the leader we had at the time in the party. And it was basically, I would say, a lot of the mutiny and infighting in the party itself, that and other things that maybe we'll not even go into now, really, that caused Libla to really pack his bag. As a young man, really, Libla was young and had a lot to give Dominica still, and a lot of years still, and left the party. And that is when Patrick John, really, Libla retired and Patrick John came on the scene.
But Ian, but also to Ian, it's important to take note that even when the very first election that the Dominica Labour Party ran in 1957, with Sean Alfred as the leader of the Dominica Labour Party, lost the election. We need many times we don't make mention of that, and I think by virtue of that, Libla himself won the elections, and when at one time a year later, maybe the local election was too small for him, Libla and the leader of the party, which was Sean Alfred, decided that they're going to go to the federal elections and run in Dominica, and both won that election in 1958. We need to make mention of that. And during that period, it must be said that Nan Ducre took up not the mantle of leader of the party, because there was still a leader, took up the mantle of deputy leader of the party and was the opposition leader. And I felt along the way that many of the beef that Nandukwe would have developed, maybe because of the fact that he knew that he stood alongside of these people and felt that he should have been leader. I'm not so sure what you all think about that.
Well, they did a lot, I mean, that when Libla actually eventually won the elections, Libla's era, I believe Libla perhaps ran Dominica for about 20 years, maybe about
1961 to 1970. 74.
Right.
To 1974.
How many years? 1974. He left in 74.
Yeah, that's like 14 years.
A lot of stuff. I mean, the roads that Libla caught, you had the people in Lapland. There was a song that the Lapland people even chanted when the East Road got to Lapland.
Shime wive over.
That's right.
Anu hele.
That's right.
Bravo.
Right. All of that is the work of Libla. Yeah, a lot of the first housing schemes in Dominica, I lived the Bath Estate housing scheme and the Canefield East housing scheme. Some of it was done by Patrick, but a lot of it was started by Libla before he actually left office. A lot of the roads, the agricultural movement, because Libla himself was an extension officer. So in really a lot of the estates were caught up around Dominica. A lot of the big estates that Geese formerly owned and a lot of the older landlords and stuff was possessed by the Dominica Labour Party at the time and caught up and made available to the peasantry, to the people of Dominica, land for the landless. So when we see today Roosevelt Skerrit making land available to people at $1 a square foot in Chance and in other areas of Dominica, really, and even in the housing policy of this government, all of this really started with Libla in the 60s. You understand? So we have to lay the proper foundation. I mean, all of this Central Water Authority, the whole cultural movement in Dominica, why Cultural Day has become so big with the ballet and the quadrille and all of those things. Libla himself actually took almost a hand in organizing these things and promoting them and promoting the social and cultural consciousness of Dominica. And that is what the labor rights who understand what the Labour Party is all about right now. That is what we hold dear in our hearts, because we know the foundation that the party itself has laid down for us to build upon. We know on whose shoulders we stand.
Yes. I just want to make mention that. Hold on. I just want to make mention that this program tonight is brought to you for the kind compliments of the Dominica Labour Party. It's a paid political announcement. Yes, Nanton.
Yes, I just wanted to mention. Of course, Ian mentioned some of the land acquisition and so on, but I just want to mention and point out, Ian, that a lot of them was done under the Minister of Lands and Fisheries at the time, Mike Douglas. So I recall, for instance, in 1977, when Mike acquired the 35 acres of land at Chance, and he had that surveyor from Zika, the son of Bolton Peter, Logan, to go around and doing the surveying at the time. I was a little boy, but I followed then, and Cecil, I recall at times being a little boy, a child, but walking down to Portsmouth, and Mike would have Labour Party meetings in a place, it's not Crater, but it's opposite where Teacher Muriel House was there, Ian. Remember there was a bar there? And I would climb the window and try to listen to the meetings of the executive. I was just a child back then. I recall in 75, going to my first job was going to tip a meeting for Mike. And there's Raymond Dinard who gave me a tip to go and tip the meeting opposite Oki in Zikak. To tip the meeting so Mike could listen to the meeting to know what Freedom Party was saying back in the days, So but early on, I said my real pride and joy in following this Labour Party was the period in the 80s when we were Labour powder. And when Mike Douglas stood up there, a lone soldier fighting for Labour, and staying in Parliament and protecting the rights of defending the rights of people. And no matter where you were, the farmers were in the gardens, the fishermen were on the boats, but they all had their transistor radio listening to Mike in Parliament. And Rosie came on board, and he was there, and Rosie always told me